there is that.
Well, you're having a good reflective time in England, Steve. So you are in a great headspace to lead us today.
Yes,
And
maybe we should start.
yeah, I'm really excited about this persona thing. In the background, I provided Steve a list of our top selling books, so that he could do his magic trick at some point. I don't know if he's got it today, but of helping me see the personas that are in our store. But this idea of thinking about persona is really new to me, and I'm finding it exciting. So
Yeah.
so Steve, you've got quite an agenda.
Yeah, maybe I'll show a list of things to talk about here. Let me see. Yes, let's see. Yes, yes. I always love how we all struggle with Zoom. So can you guys see that deck, that title, StoryBrand, etc.?
Yes, yes, sir.
So this is a silly flow chart that I created that is really about what the initial email that went out talked about. Awfully complicated, but it's just a lot. Basically, there's a lot of things to take into account when you sell books, as you guys all know. And somebody's talking. If they could mute themselves, it'd be great. But anyway, that aside, this is what Lisa Yerk, who's also on, and I talk about as the flow, which is the data that you get from your customers when you do some kind of analysis of who they are, just the basics, and of where they live or what kind of books they prefer, what they've bought, sales data and stuff like that. And then there's also the data that you have of what books are selling and what books are not selling. And then there's the whole flow that we were very interested in, which I don't think we'll get to too much today, but it's about how people go into your store, and are there dead zones in your store that you could populate with something else if you could analyze what the dead zones are. And then there are other people who have stores like Brad, where there's basically one zone, right, Brad? Brad is famous for doing his author events on the sidewalk in front of his store because he doesn't have much room in his store.
We've got another independent bookstore days coming up. We have about 7 or 8 authors already.
And are you going to do it next door or on the sidewalk?
No, we're doing it outside.
I love
and
it.
now they're excited. Now authors are calling and saying, "Are you doing it again this year?"
That's funny. It's really funny. So let's see. So the first thing is what we've been calling a flow, and we won't drive you crazy too much going into too much detail about that. But the point is that there's a lot changing, both in the store, among your customers. There's a lot to delve into, and it's daunting, I'm sure, to everybody, because as far as I can tell, most publishers, small publishers, and most booksellers operate off instinct rather than any real analysis of the audience, because it takes a lot of time and you're spending your time trying to sell books. Lisa, who's on, talks a lot about the turns, which is how many times you turn over the inventory fully. I've been kind of amazed at the amount of times that her book turns over, but I think the average for most, from what I heard from the last meeting, was 3 or 4 times a year. And then what we were just talking about, understanding your customers and their depths of interest, is something we could talk about. There's a concept that we developed back in the day of doing marketing that was about dippers, divers, and skimmers. We can talk about that, but it's basically people who maybe cruise into your store to pick up a book, look around, leave. Divers are people who come in and do a lot of deep browsing and hanging out. If there's a cafe, they'll pick up 7 books and take them to the table before they buy them and read all of them. Skimmers are people who never go into the bookstore, but who hear from their friends about books in their bookstore and mostly buy off Amazon. And personas are the way that we try and portray all these people. And the question becomes also, how do you reflect any of that in terms of display in your store? But I thought maybe, having said all that, it might be good to start with the persona thing, which Lisa was just talking about. Hang on a minute while I try and get this deck to move forward. Hello, Mr. Deck. Hang on a second. We'll have to do this. Oh, here's Tom. Here's Tom. Hang on 1 minute. I'm gonna go over to the deck and move it over. Leave it. Sorry. So let's talk for a minute. Well, first of all, does anybody have any questions that they want to ask, having that brief sort of overview of some of the things we could talk about before we get to the personas? Is there anything that anybody would like to talk about first, or ask any questions about, or any thoughts you've had from the various emails we've sent out or anything like that? You just jump right in and raise your hand and speak up. All right, well, so basically, there is a technique of trying to understand your audience now that is much more precise and useful and easy to get to than what has been going on in the past with sales data that's put into all sorts of platforms and retargeting people and all sorts of annoying practices. And the new system that's developing over the next year for most brands is more around types of audience, not individual people, because most of the platforms like Apple and Google are starting to ban retargeting and other ways of following people who come to your site once, and then then you're able to follow them and keep reminding them that they didn't finish buying a book online from you and stuff like that. There's a lot of retargeting that's going on because when people get to the end of buying something like a book, they blanch at the price and they bail, and then there's this annoying practice of going back and reminding them they haven't finished, and it's surprising how much that takes place. So anyway, the new way, which uses AI in its most advanced form, which is what I've been doing, is a shortcut that I think through these sessions we can get everybody using in a kind of very simple and untime consuming way, because our philosophy is you got no more time to do anything beyond what you're doing right now, and we'll throw ideas at you, but they have to be ideas that you can do in a minute or you're not going to do them, and even then it's a challenge to do something new. So what I did was I used AI, and I can at some point explain how, but it wasn't that complicated, to look at the 5 audience types City Lights Bookstore has. And as many of you know, if you were on last time, Paul from City Lights was on talking about the way he stocks his books and the way the bookstore works. It's an extremely focused bookstore in terms of being about bohemianism and the Beat Generation and stuff, and it's connected to a Beat Generation publishing company as well. But that nonetheless, it's interesting to look at what you find out when you start looking at some of the data and who their audience is. So apparently the most, according to the internet, the most popular book sales at City Lights is the Literary Enthusiast, and you can see the demographics are fairly young, and you can find out the interests they have and the behaviors that they use when they go into bookstores and the kind of books they buy and their motivations and stuff like that. So I won't try and translate how you move these into either marketing, whether you do newsletter marketing or anything beyond, and I won't try and take it into how you could change up the display to adapt to this, but both those are really powerful tools that you can use down the road once you get a picture of your store and who the audience is. So another of theirs, and I'll just whip through these, is the Social Activist. Not surprising, it's in San Francisco and North Beach. Beat Generation and Hippie Generation bookstore. Same thing, social justice interests, etc. The third is a creative professional, which is interesting. I hadn't thought of this, but this is the audience for City Lights Bookstore that is interested in art books and design and photography and stuff like that, which you don't normally think about, but apparently there is some evidence that this is a third audience. The casual reader is obviously somebody that everybody tries to appeal to, and the academic researcher. And then so let's get out of that for a minute. So what you can do with some of this stuff basically is, I'm going to try and crash out of this in a minute, is define your audience, understand your audience, and start to adapt so that the store's personality comes out to the right people who are interested in that, some of which just anecdotally, I'm sure, by the ways in which you meet people at the counter or sell people books, people come up and ask you questions. And actually, I think, Lisa, you'd probably argue that the most important way to talk to people and find out what audience they are is just to talk to them in the store. But this is a technique, trying to figure out the audience and who the personas are, is a technique for going beyond that.
I think it's really interesting to see, because you kind of feel it intuitively, having visited City Lights recently. And, as you say, those 5 personas, there's a gut check in me that goes, yeah, that feels right. That feels like, and this is in alignment today. Steve, I referenced you in the 2-minute podcast, the 2-minute tweaks that I put out. And today's is about how I was inspired by you to think about the bookstore like a publisher thinks about a book. And the first thing that a publisher tries to do is really define the audience. There's a really good idea. We had that for the bookstore. Now, who is interested in this really good idea? Who is interested in this book? And so developing personas seems like a really good way, just like a publisher would approach and to me that was a big mind flip. Like, if I think about the store like a publisher thinks about a book, it really changes some things and helps me prioritize some things.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think it's absolutely true. And being on the board of a publisher, I know we think about that constantly.
Mhm.
I'd like to try something. If anybody has any questions, feel free to raise your hand. But I'd love to go through each of you and hear from you who you think, just from your interactions in the store, who you think your audience is and how much overlap there is with each other, which I suspect there's quite a lot when you get down to the literary. Brad, would you like to go first?
Sure, why not?
He's my star pupil.
Right. Well, I was just thinking about this while we were talking about it because, a lot of times we really fly by the seat of our pants, but our pants have been in the seat for a long time. So we really have a feeling for when we see something, we know whether it'll hit or not, pretty well. And then we let TikTok tell us what's important on the bestseller list these days. But the general strong category for us is moms and families. We're a bedroom community. We're Silicon Valley. We have a pretty diverse group of people, from ag workers who don't spend much money in the store at all to college educated tech workers who spend money on books. But moms and families, and then we have readers young, and readers that are like middle tween, and then we have the older reader. We don't have that much in that 25 to 40 reader. It's just not that big for us. We do a lot of books as gift giving. People see us as a gift store, and that's kind of for young, middle, and older. But gift wise, more younger children's books. Grandmas come in, they buy books for their kids, but they don't necessarily buy something for themselves. So that's kind of the way we see it.
Huh.
Mhm.
Interesting. So like two ends of the scale almost.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Sarah, do you want to? I know you've got a phone man there, but okay. So is it Eastie? how about your audience?
Sure. We're in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, and it's the University of Alabama. We're right 3 blocks away from all that action. We're a very small store. We're about 2,000 square feet, and I would say the persona number one from City Lights is pretty much us. The literary enthusiast is surprisingly, and maybe because I forced it that way, but just trying to encourage classics and de-emphasize, which I call transient.
Hey, Sarah, do you mind muting your screen, your computer? Maybe I can see if I can do it. There. Yeah, go ahead. Stay, sorry.
Okay, so I'm trying to de-emphasize the transient, and I think Brad referred to it as the TikTok culture. Less of that, even though we do have a lot of university students in the city, most of them that come in are looking for romance novels. But surprisingly, placement is everything. I moved the romance novels to the back of the store, and I moved the classics up to the front. And it just makes my heart sing when those students come in and they go right for that classic section, and they really have to go out of their way to find the classics. I think it's out of sight, out of mind kind of thing, and it really is kind of working. And we are in the middle of redoing the whole front of the store, new bookshelves, kind of Franklin fixtures type stuff, and floor to ceiling, and trying to revamp the fiction and in defining the different classics like high lit, pop lit, and just general classics. And I would be interested to find out what you all think about dividing out the fiction into more directed to directed audiences. We do have used book. We have a separate used book building, which is delightful. It's just, I love going back there. I love seeing what people bring in. We do it for store credit. But a lot of other science and history are okay selling, but it really is the classic literature that we're kind of thrilled is very popular right now. I mean, really popular.
And Easy, it's absolutely fascinating. So you changed up you almost changed the taste of the university students from romance to literature by moving stuff around. That's amazing. Lisa, do you hear that?
Yeah, I mean, you come in and if you come right in the store, it used to be that the romance stuff was there because that's what they were looking for. But no, they weren't going any further into the store. So we moved
did that change
what I wanted them to look at.
Did that change sales at all? Did you lose sales because you moved romance?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Colleen Hoover is a nobody in our place, and Amy Gonzalez, I think, and there's a few of them that are still popular, but Colleen Hoover, no one asks about her anymore, and I've noticed that she's not on the top 10 in the sales either, the New York Times. But and that is like thrilling me to death, because I'm tired of that whole shtick, and there's just so much more. The other thing that did it for us too is we formed a classics book club, and we put the entries for the next 6 months on that shelf where the classic book club, where the classics are, and showing what we're reading for the next 6 months. And the books have to be older than 30 years old, and people look at that and they're taking the books off of that shelf because they've forgotten about those books, and if they're mixed in with regular fiction, they get lost. That's why I'm asking for your advice among the 13 of you, how many of you, how you divide out your fiction.
We just have hardback fiction and paperback fiction. We have, science fiction, but Quail Ridge has got hardback and paperback all together, and they have divided up their fiction into like thrillers, romantasy, romance. And all I could think of was, I don't think I could possibly look at every book and decide how to classify it. So they do that. our hardback fiction is by far and away our best-selling section, just hands down
Interesting.
best-selling. But I do have a Penguin Classics, which is always done very well among young people, very well. And but the book section got too small for all the books, so I had to decide what to do. So I pulled out the book philosophy Penguin Classics, and I put them in philosophy, and the sales took off. It was so weird.
Wait a minute, you say that again, sir. You went from what to what?
When my Penguin Classics display got too small,
Uh-huh.
I decided I would pull out the philosophy books, like, you know, St. Augustine, or even, you know, I can't even think of someone, and put them all in philosophy.
Okay.
And the books just started selling and selling and selling.
In philosophy. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Putting them
Philosophy.
in a more focused section. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that runs counter to what some people are doing. It's fascinating.
Well, it's yeah.
Hope what works.
But do you think both Easty and Sarah, do you think that those things that you did over, say, the past year increased sales, helped with sales in general?
Oh yeah. Oh yes, definitely.
Yeah, because
I mean, there's
that's
certain
terrific.
books I can't keep in, the classics that I can't keep in, and
Mhm.
ones I would never have thought of, you know, are selling like hotcakes. So it's I'm
There
you know
are
Dracula.
Do
there
you see a difference? I'm sorry, Sarah. Do you see a difference between the people who are coming to the store now because of that? Has also the demographic changed?
No, I can't believe they would start coming just because I moved a few books out of, you know, the Penguin Classics. The younger people really are looking at the classics a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, they still like science fiction, but there are a lot of classics selling, and some books like, what is with Marcus Aurelius and Meditations? I mean,
Tell me about it. I
I
know.
I sell it in multiple editions. I just keep reordering them, and they 3 different editions, and they just keep selling.
And
I don't know.
Kafka for me.
That's amazing.
Where
Yeah.
did that come from?
I
Well,
don't
but
well,
know. Is it some
it
TikTok
sounds,
thing? I don't know.
doesn't it sound like, do you guys have a feel that the two of you that you've adapted to the audience as they've changed their tastes too? Who do you think is it, chicken and egg? In other words, what came
Oh, I
first?
follow them.
I think so. Yeah.
I
I
followed. I
think
mean, years
I would like
ago,
to think
No, go ahead.
I didn't have someone came in, a young person asked me if I had any tarot cards or anything, and I said no, and I started thinking about it. So I saw every now and then I would see them on a list, and I'd pick a few up, and man, now I have a whole section because they sell.
Yeah. Yeah. Easy, what were you going to say? You were going to say something.
I'd like to think that that's changed the audience. I don't think it has, but I think it's uh seeing where they go. I pay attention to flow, you know, when they
Yeah,
come into
yeah.
the bookstore, do they turn left or do they turn right? And whatever is making them turn that direction, I'll pay attention to that. And if I feel like they turn right because most people are right-handed, or they see something and they're trying to avoid it, so they turn to another direction. That was one issue with us. But I tend to put the things that I want them to look at in the direction that they tend to be turning in. And that seems to have worked. But
Wow.
you know, again, we have a small store, so it's not like you're walking into a vacuous place and you don't know where to go first. I try to I guess subtly move people into into a specific direction.
That's fabulous. That's something that Lisa and I spent a long time talking about the other day, because you know, if there were a heat map, I don't know if you guys know the concept of heat map, that you would track your customers and where they went and how many went there and all that sort of thing. And if there were a way of doing a heat map in the bookstore, it'd be extremely useful, because you would probably discover that there were certain places that nobody ever went, which you can see maybe, but you could, and that's, I'm really impressed, Easty, that you and Sarah, that you're already doing.
Well, the other way is to push the books up, you know, so they're flat on the front.
Yep.
I ask my staff at the end of every day, push the books up towards the edge of the shelf, and so it's flat. And that way you can tell if that shelf has been looked at. Whether, you know, people, when they put books in and out, they don't necessarily match it up to what you had there. So like our messiest shelf is poetry. So I know people are looking at poetry
I love
and the
it.
children too.
I love it.
Because they're floppy is why.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
should tell people to leave the book sticking out after they look at it so you can tell where people went at during the day. It'd be really interesting to encourage that behavior.
Yeah.
I like Brad's comment that your heat map is tracked by where you have to vacuum most often. That's that's true. That's true. We did a version of that this week. We took a little map, but just a rectangle of the store, and Stacy, our assistant manager, she tracked the first 10 people who came into the store and just drew a line where they went and where they stopped, and then a note about them. Were they male or female, or toddler or something else? We had an 11th person that we kind of threw out because she was like, I thought this was the library. And maybe a little confused, but it was not the library. But it was amazing to me. Of course, what we know is that people generally gravitate, like you were saying, Eastie, to the right. That's store retail dogma. I mean, we know that people always go to the right. That's the hottest spot. And that was true in our store, where they went to the book clubs. We have about 18 standing book clubs right now. And um, they all have a book, and people were hitting that most often. What struck me is how many dead areas we had. There were so much. I think we had a lot of skimmers and some dippers, but a lot of areas that went untouched and unwalked in our 1,100 square foot little store. So that was something for us to really look at. And I'm interested in the personas to go, why are we missing those? We also pull the books out every day and kind of make sure they're flush, and they've got the T-shelves in them so they don't hit the back, and they stay that way most of the time. But it was very interesting. And I wanted to answer your question on classics. We put the collectible classics in their own very special section, and they are one of the hottest zones, at least in terms of sales, for us. Like if we get the leather bound Tolkien's in, we put them in a special display, they're gone within an hour. So it's like really fast, and a voracious. We put the classical collector in the window a lot of times and do special things around that. And we put Colleen Hoover on the very bottom shelf. If somebody wants her, then they know they want her, and they're willing to bend. So they're willing to go down there. So in terms of we do our fiction in thrillers, mysteries, thrillers, new adult, new adult, fantasy. So we have a lot of subsections in fiction, and that really does seem to help people connect with their books. One last comment to build on what the group is saying. Some of the new classics are old books, like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is one, and that is done really well for us. And Anne of Green Gables, and the Nancy Drew and Hardy Boys, and it's just some things that have been C.S. Lewis, a lot of things that have been around a long time, and we kind of elevate those and are seeing that be helpful.
It's really fascinating. Lisa, we found 3 or 4 new, very practical ways of doing heat mapping by looking at don't vacuum, tell people to leave the books out. Besides because what Lisa and I cooked up was to have her store manager, or one of the people, if we said if you'll track 10 customers for an hour, we'll give you a free book. But Wendy, do you want to talk a little about your store and what the demographic and persona types are?
Sure. Hi, I'm Wendy Hudson from Nantucket Book Partners. We operate 2 bookstores, only a few blocks from each other. The Nantucket Bookworks is full of toys and gifts and whatnot. Not quite as many books, but heavier on children's. We have a giant chocolate corner that we're killing it with. I recommend everybody add a bunch of chocolate. And then Mitchell's is on Main Street. It's like the picture that's behind me. So it's a little bit, it's almost all just books, not a lot of sidelines. We do a huge business with Ellen Hilderbrand like huge. So beach books are really a big deal for us, but we get a little tired of only doing that. So I don't know how many of you were at Winter Institute, but I mean, I loved hearing Paul Yamazaki. I love that YouTube. Thank you so much for posting that interview just as more of a follow-up, because I've read his book twice. Like it really gave me a shot in the arm for what books and what you stock. I try very hard not to have Mitchell's be like leaning. We have a lot of, conservative customers, very wealthy billionaires, this kind of stuff, and they would come to Mitchell's more than Bookworks. I mean, I don't want to present crap, you know, in this, it's just so on my mind, Super Tuesday and what's going on in the country. Like, how does an independent bookstore help with this and, progressive ideas the way Paul has, but, responsible, I'm sorry, I'm a feminist, so, I'll just say like responsible conservative voices. I want to represent both sides of the aisle, like make people feel that there's something to be learned, and educating the customers in a way that Paul talked about, like just presenting another point of view. Like I came home and I ordered a ton more New Directions things, a lot more old poetry. We've got a giant classic section to answer that question. We do separate out our genre fiction, and we've put them lower we have a huge fiction wall, and we've just moved like romance, thrillers. We tried historical fiction, but of course, like half the entire section is historical fiction, so it's trickier. And it, to the point that's been made by everybody, like our Nantucket room is upstairs. It's like you make the people go to where they're going to go. As far as personas, one thing I was surprised City Lights didn't mention was tourists. Nantucket, of course, is a tourist destination. City Lights for me, every time I'm in San Francisco, I go straight to City Lights. When I'm in Paris, I go straight to Shakespeare and Company. I don't need to really buy books, but I buy whatever the heck they've got that says their bookstore name on it, so like, and I go to everybody, like any of you guys, when I'm in your town, I'll come to your store and I'll buy something, hopefully that says the name of the store. So it's just something, the line of sight thing that Paul talked about, I found very, very awesome. Like when somebody walks in your store and like whichever direction they're going to turn, just have something probably new, but also something maybe surprising, or pair the books together. I just really, really love looking at this in a way that, you give your customers credit for digging into your shelves, and hopefully you're really saying something that you want to say to them through what you're offering. That's the hope, right?
So Wendy, how would you define like let's say 2 or 3 different types of customers you have in terms of age and interest?
Well, I mean, we've got, we've sold, I'll just tell you guys, and don't slap me because it's ending. We have pre-sold 6,000 copies of Ellen Hildebrand's book for next year. So those women, they are almost all women across the country. We do a booming business on the website with that. They are Ellen fans and they're rabid. So if I had to say, like, that is my the bookstore. She's retiring, so we're all going to go off a cliff next year. The year-rounders. Oh, here's something I'll mention that pains me. We try to be a community bookstore, but we are not reflecting our community. We don't have enough Spanish-speaking books on our shelves. Our community is incredibly diverse on Nantucket. Our year-round population is not what you'd expect, probably what most people expect. But and we're not doing a good job of connecting with them. And it's something that keeps me up at night. Like, how do I solve that? Or maybe it's not my problem to solve. How can I encourage somebody else to get into the business? I don't know. But that's something that we don't have. So I thought that's kind of it's like in the museum where they have the blank face, like who isn't here is an interesting, persona to also talk about, like, who are you not getting? Because I think I could definitely repeat that we have all the same people that you guys were just talking about. I like to think that we have a, highly educated, almost like a college town kind of population. So we try to sell the good books. We do huge classics
Wendy,
too. This is a great
Wendy, what
trend.
percentage of your sales do you think is tourism based?
Ooh, well,
In terms of like guides.
not that much guides. A lot of Nantucket books, but hardcover fiction is our best. Our best
Yeah, it's like
section at bookstores. Yeah, that and regional. Those are the two. And of course, a lot of hardcover fiction is Nantucket. So
yeah, fascinating. Wow. Let's see, Tom, do you want to talk at all? You're muted there.
Sure. Yeah, sure. Hey, a longtime viewer, first time I've been able to attend live. So our customers, we have both an older customer set, and that is a lot of our like retirees, grandparents, but we're also in a so we're in a tourist town, so we always divide it tourist and regulars. Our
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Tom, but where are you?
Oh, yeah, sure. We're in Michigan. So we're in Southwest Michigan. We're in Marshall, Michigan, so Southwest Michigan. And so we get we have our retirees and our grandparents. We also have a relatively young subset of like 20 somethings, some with littles and kids, some without. But there's a big giant gap for us in between those two for most of our customer traffic. And so we try and divide those segments in. We've got young people who are without littles and are they typically skew towards whatever's like popular, whatever they're picking up on social media. And then our ones with littles are a little more attentive to our suggestions. And then like when I really love the idea of like talking about like the sections, and we divide a lot of our fiction out, and we use the BISAC codes to sort a lot of our fiction. So it's mostly algorithm driven, but our classics also massive sellers for us, and particularly with young people. And we drive a lot of that, but we put shelf talkers on with books that are banned. And so many people pick those up because they're like, oh, why is Great Gatsby banned? And then we talk about that. So we celebrate banned book week when it pops up, but we have a banned book display every week of the year. And we change it out a little bit. And like we saw when we started doing that, we saw tremendous spikes in books. A Farewell to Arms sat on our shelf, and our turns were like 1 or 2 a year, maybe. Like it was terrible. Now with the banned book card on it, we sell like one every other month. Just boom, boom, boom. People are picking it up and reading it because they're, oh, it's banned. You know, it suddenly becomes like a thing people want to read and know about.
Wow. How big is your store, Tom?
We are 2,000 square feet in our main store, and then we have a semi-permanent pop-up that changes every quarter in the next town over that's about 200 square feet.
Oh, I see. Yeah, fascinating. And what have you learned about moving sections around and kind of the heat map of your store?
Yeah, so I am a big mover. So I started working at an indie when I was a high schooler, and then went off and worked for Barnes & Noble for 20 years, and now we own an indie. So I picked up the culture at Barnes & Noble of display, change, move. And so that's how my booksellers currently describe what I do. Like we go in and we constantly adjusting and changing and thinking about. Our philosophy is, where's the customer going to find this? What's a good way to help them find this? And so some are like affinity sections that are just always going to stay. We're always going to have a horror section because, you know, you can set that up and people are going to kind of expect like they're going to find like books. I want somebody to come in looking for the new Stephen King or Grady Hendrix and go, oh, this other one too. And so we're able to kind of mix those in. And then sometimes we do ones that are they're affinity, but they're more like we made them up. So like we did I Survived for Grown-Ups, and it was all these like survival stories. You know, David Graham's The Wager came out, and that's what prompted it. And so we just literally built a whole bay, pulling from all these different sections, fiction, nonfiction, like about like survival stories in nature. And people loved it and they gobbled it up. And now, of course, it slowed down. So today I'm taking it down and we're doing something different. But like it's like one of those, it's not really a table or end cap. It's a section in our system and it takes up a whole bay, but it's not permanent. It's gonna come and go. And I think I like that because I feel like it adds to the discovery. Like our regulars come in and they often go, oh, everything moved again. And really everything didn't move, like less than 10% of our store moves, but it's enough to encourage them to kind of browse and check out what changed and what's new.
You have just articulated such great examples of what we talk about all the time, creating a scintillating title, like instead of empowered women, you know, something that's just really, I Survived for Grown-Ups is wonderful. And, you know, who would win, you know, for grown-ups would be really fun. So taking something like that and then this change display, helping them find it, you know, this idea of that new experience all the time. I'm really glad we're recording what you said because there's a lot of good stuff there.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks.
Brittany, are you there? Brittany from Kepler's. There she is.
Here. I'm not able to turn my video on, but I'm happy to chat. Can you hear me okay?
Oh yeah.
I'm a new AirPod user, so I'm still figuring them out.
Yeah.
It's been interesting listening to what you guys were saying, and Lisa and I chatted. I think she was out west for, it may have been Emerson Collective. Um, and I think a lot, Lisa, we sort of stood in the front, what was then the front of the store, and talked about this left-right conversation. Um,
Yeah,
we
we
have a
did.
really big space, and we originally had one entrance that customers knew for a very long time, and we moved things kind of at the height of the pandemic, and that, I mean, you would have thought that we had made major changes and not just shifted a register. Um, but then we moved things back. And so it's been interesting to see how people have recalibrated. Um, we have art books at the back of the store that definitely don't necessarily get the same amount of traffic that the kind of front of the store, but we really hit people with the things that they are looking for. We have two tables right when you walk in that are the first one is featured, excuse me, nonfiction. It's hardcover nonfiction. And it's really just an amalgamation of all of the new nonfiction that's coming out. It's not separated by genre. And then right behind that are the new fiction hardcover books. And behind that is the new fiction paperback. So it really does sort of say, we know what you're going to ask for. Here it is. And then the rest of the store, things are on tables if they're new, things are in section if they're not quite as new. Our team is really diligent about, making sure that we've run the numbers before things move from their display or their new section before they go into their home section. So there's a lot of time and care that goes into that. And then in terms of, it was interesting listening to the customer part of the conversation. We are, so everybody knows, in Menlo Park, which is a hop, skip, and a jump from Stanford. And so we have quite a bit of that traffic. This is a tangent, but maybe we'll offer some of the customer base. I play in a women's soccer league in Menlo Park, and I don't think a single person that I play with doesn't have a PhD, a JD, and so it is that sort of, it's the most educated space I have ever been, lived, and worked in. And so we see that kind of customer come in very frequently. We also see a lot of families. Kepler's has been here for a long time. So we get a lot of people who come in and say, I grew up here and now I come with my kids and my grandkids. And so I think really the goal with what we are selling and reading and recommending is to make sure that there is something in there for everyone, regardless of who they are, where they're coming from, or what they're interested in.
But have you Lisa and I were in your store when she was out last year, and I know your leader very well, Praveen. What's interesting about your store, and people should know, it's a large store. Is it about 4,000 square feet or something?
I think it's bigger.
Yeah, and it has a great advantage that everybody, I'm sure, would love to have, that City Lights also has, which is a restaurant cafe right next door, so that there's a real connection between browsing books and hanging out and stuff like that. But your store, half of it is more traditional shelves that are almost, a lot of them are spine out. And then you have a big section of sort of James Daunt-like style tables at waist height with a lot of cover displays. And are you moving more and more towards the latter and away from the more traditional shelves?
That's an interesting question, and I don't know, quite honestly, Steve, if I am the best person at the store to answer that question. I think the mix as it stands is very intentional. The table books tend to be newer books, and they move from those tables kind of when they're not selling as quickly, or when there are newer books that we are ready to replace them with. And they generally go from the tables into their home sections. So there is a table for new genre books. And when those are done on the table, they will go into their respective home mystery, sci-fi, fantasy section. We're not doing returns straight from the tables. But there definitely is an interesting sort of navigational and browsing mix between what is really in the stacks and on the shelves. And I think that you can get a little more lost in the stacks than you can get lost in and on the tables.
Yeah, yeah. No, when I'm in London, which I am this month, I go to all of James Don's bookstores if I can, because he's the radical in his own bookstores. Barnes and Noble, which he heads up, is moving that way, and the Barnes and Noble in Brooklyn has some kind of Daunt-like display now, because that's become their more experimental store.
There's another store where I went and had to buy the tote bag.
Yeah. Well, what's fascinating is that
When in London, gotta go.
but I think it's a great technique. And I actually, on a deck I did, that I'll probably include afterwards, did a lot of showed a lot of pictures of his various stores, Barnes and Nobles. And then to me, the other two great examples, which I will show you very quickly because we're getting close to the end, is anthropology stores. Can you see that? So this is the new anthropology store, I believe. I think it's in Marylebone, or it's in London right now, that just opened up. And what's fascinating about this is that they have for years pioneered this technique of designing a path through their store. Let me see if I can find some more of their stuff here. And well, we'll forget that. But anyway, their point being that they've designed a lot of entertaining stuff that is not for sale, that has to do even with Paris, Paris in the 30s and the 20s, and sort of an artistic tradition. And they have I knew the guy that worked on the design. They have a very careful design of where they want you to walk and what they want you through. And basically, it's the IKEA system without driving you crazy. You don't get trapped in the store, but you do take a very complicated path through a small store sometimes. And I think, but I also have pictures I'll send out from Urban Outfitters and from REI. And REI, I think, has done an incredible job of display. Now, they have huge spaces, so they have a lot of freedom. It's the same thing that Barnes & Noble has. But I think it's still there are lessons there in terms of other objects and things and signs and instructions and ways to interact with their products, and weird mixes of their products at REI that I think are fascinating. So I'd urge you all to, if you haven't been to an REI recently, to go and take a look, because it's very inspirational. Let's see who.
That is a very strange piano.
Yeah.
That piano, that keyboard is weird.
Yeah, that's right. It's probably designed to take a look here. Let me find it again. It's probably designed to start conversations. What is that piano? Yeah, here. I'll show it to you if I can. Let's see. You can tell us what piano is. It's a Rockefeller Grand. And so anyway,
something's wrong with the keyboard, but that's neither here nor there. But
also shot with very close with an iPhone and on wide angle, I think, which doesn't help. But I'm curious. I'll be curious as we move forward, how many people can create more of a path, track more of a path, and have surprising elements. There's a section, I think it's in the Barnes and Noble in Brooklyn, where it's labeled military. It just says military, and it's mostly books about military conflicts, both historical and current. And suddenly there's 2 or 3 Ruth Bader Ginsburg books in there that somebody put in there, one of the staff, to surprise people. And it's some kind of either an Easter egg or a commentary. But what I think is fascinating about what Daunt has tried to encourage in his stores, and obviously they have a lot more freedom and money to do things like this, is surprising stuff that you don't expect. All his tables in his own stores, the Daunt stores in London, famously have mixes. They're all cover up the flat tables, waist high tables, and they'll have a mix. They'll have a Stanley Tucci book on taste mixed in with a book on philosophy, and it's that way through most of the store. And people spend an enormous amount of time browsing because they're captivated by the covers, and then they start looking through, and the more and more covers. So I think they do a lot of random display based on cover association rather than theme or anything like that, which is really fascinating. It'd be really interesting to try that in some of your stores in one table. Um, any other thoughts? Anybody have any other thoughts? I don't think we've called on Aggie. Aggie, are you there? I won't attempt to.
I am here, but I'm commuting on a Caltrain to work. But can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, so I will be really brief because I'm comfortable talking in front of other commuters here.
That's okay.
But what we do at Kepler's that is maybe distinguishes us from other stores is having actually a lot of displays around the store. So adult section has 9 frequently changed displays. Sometimes they're thematic, sometimes they're not. For example, for March, we have, of course, women's health actually display. We are about to put up gun safety and call for action display. Currently, we have science and philosophy connection display that was actually curated by our booksellers. So another thing that we do is most of those displays used to be generated by me as a buyer, but we started changing that and involving actually our staff. What I constantly am thinking about when I'm coming into the store every day is trying to see the store from the perspective of the customer with the fresh eyes. And I think those displays help us because I'm always worried, oh my God, do we look like just any other store? Are people going to get bored looking at our new table books? So we're really trying something different with curated literature and translation section, with historical fiction section. And one of the things that I also really like is trying to promote and feature independent imprints. So we acquired Floor Spinner for a New York Review of Books. And that's one of our favorite imprints, and a lot of people comment on that.
Aggie, what is your bookstore and where is it again?
Kepler's. I'm also at Kepler's.
You're at Kepler's in the Southwest? And
Kepler's in Menlo Park.
Oh, Kepler's in Menlo Park. I see. Yes, I gotcha. So you and Brittany are at the same store, basically.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. But I would say that what you just talked about is like really dead on for what we've been thinking about, and at least and some of us talking about a lot of the special stuff that you're doing. Tried to differentiate your store from every other store is extremely important, and having surprising displays and all that, everything is terrific. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Eben, are you there?
Yeah, I am. Well, I'm in Wales, so it's the end of the day for me. But I'm with Parnassus Book Service on Cape Cod, technically, which, if you don't know, is we've been a family-run bookstore since the 1950s. Mostly used books. You can see some of them behind me, I think. But I live in Wales, and I do research into book selling over here, as well as contributing the online side of the bookstore back in the Cape. And I was thinking about some of the things people have been saying. One thing I did with my students last year, I had about 30 students in the room, and asked them to draw maps of their favorite bookstore. And it was interesting that how many of them, I mean, we're always told they should have it clear aisles and you should be able to find stuff and whatnot. They drew and talked about how complicated the store was, how they love finding the inner sanctum of the store in a way. So there was that sort of, they made it their own because there were hidden nooks and crannies. Like you were saying about unusual things in the store, building a place that's you can get lost in, or you can discover things in that you weren't expecting. I think that is a big part of design layouts for stores. It's always been one of the things that I've liked about our store.
How big is your store?
God, I don't even know anymore. It's a large building we've owned since 1957, 58. It's mainly just one big first floor. Wendy's seen it before.
And where is it again?
Cape Cod, Massachusetts.
Cape Cod, yeah. But you operate from Wales.
It's
Yeah,
the
I've been
bookstore
over
in
here.
the AJ Fickrey movie. You're burying the lead.
That's it. Oh, yes, I am. Yeah, watch the movie Jay Victory. That was filmed in our store.
Wow,
Yes.
that's fascinating. Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
it's
some
fun.
and the work that you did with students, I'd really be interested in seeing. That's really fascinating.
Yeah,
A lot of surprises.
yeah. It's again.
Are you in that bookstore town in Wales? Is it Hay-on Wye or?
I
is
do
that
a lot
right?
of stuff down there. I was in
Okay.
the Scottish. There's a Scottish book town, Wigtown, which I was in last week, which is much smaller, but it's really nice as well.
Nice.
Yeah, but Hay-on-Wye is definitely a worth a visit. But I do a bit of work with them over the years, throughout Wales, really.
That's
Trying to study bookstores and the culture of a bookstore.
yeah, yeah. A powerful culture like yours or City Lights is really important. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, one of the things about City Lights that I love is, I live close to San Francisco, is it's like the Winchester Mystery House in miniature. Even though I've been going there for 50 years, I probably would guess, since I was a kid, that I've found rooms I didn't know existed downstairs and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah, there's things going to a store, particularly into a bookstore, you want to feel like you're gonna find something you weren't expecting, whether it's a book or a new room or something. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's all about surprise.
Yeah.
Well, since we've reached the end of our time, I'd like to just ask how many people would like to talk more about display? How many people would like to talk more about marketing? So let's pick between those two subjects now. If you're interested more about display, and then that goes into, I'm sure, into inventory and other questions about in-store questions, raise your hand.
My hand.
Yeah, okay, we've had enough of that. How about newsletters and marketing? And how about if you don't have a preference? All right. Well, this has been recorded. It's been fantastic. I've learned a lot. We'll send out an email with the recording for those who missed it, if you have friends who missed it, including the chat, and then we'll include some of the thoughts we had on a deck we chose not to show because it's really boring to show decks. But there are some elements and things from REI and anthropology that I think are interesting. Any final questions?
Well, certainly would like to see more of that deck.
Okay.
It's inspiration.
All right, Brad, you're going to get the whole deck. Look out. No, I'll send the whole thing. Feel free to trash it if you're not interested. All right. Well, thanks so much, and we'll see you in a month. Bye-bye.